Welcome back to Historically Drowsy, where we aim to bore you to sleep. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, blow out the candles, and relax. Let me tell you stories you never needed to know. There is something strange about what we whisper to children. Before they can read, before they can reason, we hand them rhymes. Simple, sing-songy, and often sinister if you listen closely. A ring around the Rosie. A man with a broken crown. Sheep with wealth distribution issues. They chant them in playgrounds. We hum them beside cribs. But what are we really saying? Because nursery rhymes, these tiny little verses we pass down like heirlooms, didn't begin as lullabies. They were once messages, sometimes mockery, sometimes protest, sometimes just coded warnings hiding in plain sight. Tonight, I'd like to invite you to lie back, close your eyes, and journey with me through a lullaby labyrinth, one built on political satire and protest, on forgotten rituals and twisted little truths. Because these sweet little rhymes didn't always come from sweetness, they were born from political satire disguised in rhyme. Protest songs passed quietly through generations, folk tales and urban legends, told with a wink and a warning, and yes, entertainments like minstrel shows, with deeply problematic origins. Some were cautionary tales, some were jokes at the expense of kings, some were never meant for children at all, and yet we kept singing them. And with every repetition, their sharp edges dulled, their origins softened into melody. But if you listen carefully, you can still hear the echo. So yes, there are dark roots, especially in "Oh Susanna," born from minstrel songs and racial caricature. Bah, bah, black sheep, a woolly little tale of taxation. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, a floral arrangement of possible torture. Ring around the Rosie, likely not about the plague, but it certainly feels like it, and yet we sing them night after night, century after century. Because something about these rhymes is sticky, something about them clings to memory. Maybe it's the melody, maybe it's the mystery, or maybe it's just that our brains can't resist the weird, the morbid, and the gently unsettling. So if you're still with me, if your eyes are starting to close but your curiosity is wide awake, good. That's exactly where I want you. Let's begin with a rhyme that started as an insult and became an anthem. Let's begin with the nation's most absurd feathered patriot. What about Yankee Doodle, the anthem of colonial mockery? Long before it was a 4th of July toe tapper, Yankee Doodle was a joke, a musical insult, a British snicker at the bumpkin colonials during the French and Indian War, and perhaps the greatest act of accidental rebranding in American history. The British officers sang it to mock American colonial troops. They were scrappy, under-equipped, and deeply unfashionable. You see, in 18th century England, the term macaroni didn't mean pasta. It meant a man of extreme, almost theatrical fashion, a sort of powdered wig peacock. Think tight pants, elaborate hats, and a kind of waistcoat peacocking that would make modern runway models blush. So when our dear Yankee Doodle stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni, the line dripped with sarcasm, as if to say, look at this colonial fool. He thinks a single feather makes him fashionable. The joke was cruel. But, as Americans do, they took the insult and wore it like a badge of honor. By the time of the American Revolution, Yankee Doodle had become a marching song of defiance. The very troops it mocked were now belting it proudly as they fought the redcoats. And the term Yankee, originally a sneer from the British, soon became something oddly proud. Americans took the jab, turned it inside out, and began to sing it back with a grin. The more absurd the song sounded, the more gleefully they sang it. Defiance by melody. After the war, Yankee Doodle stuck around, not as protest, but as patriotism. It crept into schoolrooms, into textbooks, into the tiny brass bands of dusty July parades. A children's song now, polished, but still faintly ridiculous. Over the years, the tune became part of the American fabric. It was used in cartoons and commercials, in state ceremonies. It was parodied endlessly, sometimes to poke fun at the very patriotic tone it helped build. You can hear it, whistled in old Looney Tunes, strummed on banjos in Civil War camps, even performed on kazoo in elementary school recitals. But behind the music, the idea lingers. How strange that a song meant to mock Americans became a tune they loved. How deliciously ironic that a feather and a pony and a misunderstanding of Italian fashion could wind up stitched into the nation's musical DNA. And what about that feather anyway? Why did Yankee Doodle choose it? Why not a ribbon or a badge? Some say the line is more than satire, that it's a tiny act of rebellion, a feather instead of a plume, a macaroni mock-up that says, yes, I look ridiculous, and I'm still marching. That is why Yankee Doodle becomes not just a joke, but a metaphor for pride in the face of scorn, for transforming mockery into identity, for owning your silliness so completely that it becomes strength. By the 19th century, the rhyme had settled into the cradle. Stripped of its satire, simplified for tiny ears, it became a children's song. The feather lost its venom. The pony trotted gently. And macaroni became just another mystery children accepted without question, like why Humpty Dumpty was on a wall at all. Today, it's the official state song of Connecticut, still silly, still catchy, and still quietly rebellious. So if you ever hear the opening notes of Yankee Doodle again, remember. It began as an insult, and somehow that insult became a lullaby. And so gently we ride on to the next rhyme, a cheerier tune with a murkier shadow. Now for the one and only. Oh, Susanna, minstrelsy in the cradle. Let's float now to the year 1848. The gold rush is beginning. The banjo is in vogue, and minstrel shows, the blackface variety, are at the height of American entertainment. In this context, a jaunty little tune named Oh, Susanna takes center stage. Written by Stephen Foster, who is often credited as the father of American music, Oh, Susanna became a runaway hit. It was absurd, catchy, and performed in exaggerated dialect. The original lyrics included lines like, "It rained all night the day I left, the weather it was dry," nonsensical, charming, until you listen closely, because under the nonsense is something darker. The song debuted in minstrel shows, performed by white men in blackface, caricaturing enslaved black Americans. The dialect, the tone, the humor, all built on stereotypes now, thankfully discarded. Stephen Foster himself is a complicated figure. He was one of the first truly professional American songwriters, penning more than 200 songs. Some were sentimental, ballads. Others were minstrel tunes that played to the cruel humor of the time. Foster didn't invent blackface minstrelsy, but he helped popularize it through music that, in hindsight, is difficult to separate from the context in which it thrived. Yet, despite its origins, Oh, Susanna evolved. It slipped away from the minstrel stage and into the American folk tradition. As the gold rush swept west, so did the song. It became an unofficial anthem of fortune seekers, a banjo on your knee, a dream in your pocket. By the 20th century, the lyrics were cleaned up and the dialect flattened. The song became a fixture of elementary school music rooms and children's television, its dark past obscured by bright cartoon smiles and sing-along sheets. You'll still find it in folk anthologies, its melody too familiar to forget. And that's the troubling part. Its stickiness, its survival. Why does a song with such origins persist? Some would say it's the tune itself. Infectious, upbeat, undeniably catchy. Others would point to America's long habit of smoothing rough cultural edges, taking something troubling and transforming it into something tolerable, even lovable. Today, you might hear Oh Susanna strummed on a ukulele or hummed in a history classroom. The context is rarely explained, the shadows rarely addressed, and so we arrive at an uncomfortable truth. Many American nursery rhymes weren't born in the nursery. They were adopted from adult entertainment, repackaged for childhood, and carried forward by melody alone. So let's ask, softly, why some problematic songs linger and others vanish. Is it nostalgia? Is it denial? Or is it something more unconscious? A cultural amnesia wrapped in harmony? There's no simple answer, but there is a quiet weight to knowing. Tonight, we remember, softly, and with sleepy eyebrows slightly raised, ring around the rosy, a pocket full of plague. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. So, sings the circle of children hand in hand, joyfully spinning before collapsing to the ground in a heap of giggles. Harmless? Possibly. Plague-ridden? Maybe. For decades, a popular theory has suggested that this rhyme is about the Black Death, the plague that swept across Europe in the 14th century. The rosy might refer to the rash that appeared on infected skin. The posies were supposedly carried in pockets to mask the smell of decay. Ashes, ashes, echoed the funeral pyres. And we all fall down. Well, that one's self-explanatory. It sounds convincing, horrifyingly convincing. Too convincing, in fact. Many historians now argue that this interpretation is an invention of the 20th century. The earliest known versions of the rhyme don't appear until well after the height of the plague, and ashes wasn't part of the earliest texts. It may have been added later for dramatic flair, or by a particularly macabre teacher. Others suggest the rhyme is just a whimsical game, devoid of deeper meaning. It's possible that we, as modern listeners, crave hidden darkness in childhood cheer more than those who first sang the words. Still, the idea stuck. And perhaps it's because it fits so well. There's something hauntingly comforting about imagining that the rhyme carried a hidden warning, some forgotten folk memory of pestilence smuggled into the schoolyard, a coded tale of survival, of grief passed down in the only way it could be, through rhyme and repetition. Consider the way children play it, dancing in a circle, singing the lines over and over. Then the collapse. We all fall down. The fall is theatrical, giddy, but it carries with it a soft echo of mass tragedy. A performance of death, played out in miniature, with laughter. The simplicity of the game adds to the mystery. No one questions why we say the words. No one explains them. They're just there, passed down like muscle memory, like the quiet instinct to sing in the dark. And it's not just the plague theory that makes this rhyme so compelling. It's the feeling it leaves behind, that soft chill beneath the play, that tickle of something ancient. Maybe it's not about the plague, but it feels like it is, and that's the power of folklore. Meaning isn't always about accuracy. Sometimes it's about resonance, and Ring Around the Rosie resonates, like a bell tolling softly from a distant time. In modern classrooms, the rhyme is still sung, still played. The history lesson is optional. The laughter is mandatory. And yet, the fall at the end, the sudden drop, is still part of the ritual. So maybe it isn't really about the plague, but maybe it's about loss, about repetition, about the way we turn fear into song. Because even if the ashes were added later, they stuck, and so did the fall. Let's talk about Jack and Jill, the Hill of Heads. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. It begins as a gentle climb, two companions, a hill, a chore. But in just a few short lines, things go terribly wrong. Jack breaks his crown, Jill tumbles after, and no one gets any water. For such a short rhyme, the number of interpretations it has inspired is, frankly, impressive. One of the most macabre theories places Jack and Jill in revolutionary France. Jack, supposedly, is Louis XVI, his crown being both symbolic and literal, and when he lost it to the guillotine in 1793, Jill Marie Antoinette wasn't far behind. It's poetic and terrifying, but, as with most nursery lore, it's difficult to prove. The rhyme likely predates the revolution. Still, its fatal fall and bloody undertones make the comparison alluring. Another theory ties the rhyme to taxation. In a village in Somerset, England, a law was passed in the 17th century that taxed liquid volume. Locals found creative ways to dodge the tax by collecting water with smaller containers or by fetching it from sources outside official control. A cheeky rhyme about this workaround might have eventually evolved into our tale of Jack and Jill. Yet another version cast Jack and Jill as real people in the village of Kilmersdon. Jack, they say, was courting Jill. She became pregnant. Jack was killed by a falling rock on a hill. Jill died in childbirth. Tragic. Specific. Possibly apocryphal. But what's perhaps most compelling is what the rhyme became after its original lines. Later versions continue the story. Jack goes home. He's patched up with vinegar and brown paper, a curious treatment. Jill tries to help, and together they struggle on. These additional verses, often forgotten now, turn the rhyme into something almost epic, a mini saga of accident and recovery, of domestic medicine, of perseverance. The characters become more human, more endearing. And in classrooms, Jack and Jill have become fixtures, their names shorthand for paired adventure. Their hill, a stage for misfortune. Their fall, a warning whispered in rhyme. Modern adaptations, of course, abound. The pair has appeared in cartoons, horror stories, and even satirical rewrites. In some, they're romantic. In others, tragic. Sometimes they survive. Sometimes they don't. But always they go up that hill. And always they come tumbling down. Why has this rhyme endured so well? Perhaps because it mirrors life too closely. We strive. We fall. We try to get back up. Sometimes with vinegar and brown paper. Sometimes with something stronger. So next time you hear it, or chant it absently, remember the weight it carries. Behind its sing-song meter is a little tragedy, a little resilience, and a lot of room for interpretation. Ready? Let's head down the hill and into the river. Now for the story of London Bridge is falling down, the refrain of collapse. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. It begins softly. A chant, a pattern. The same phrase, repeated again and again like a structural mantra. It has rhythm, it has weight, and like the bridge it describes, it does not hold forever. The song is old, very old. Versions of it appear across Europe. But the London version, the one that speaks of falling and rebuilding, is the one that stuck. The one sung by children, holding hands, forming arches, and letting their friends drop through, giggling. But the rhyme is more than a playground game. It's a record, a reminder, and depending on who you ask, a ghost story. London Bridge has existed in various incarnations since Roman times. Wooden at first, then stone again. It has burned, it has been attacked, it has collapsed under its own weight. Time has not been kind to it. In the 11th century, it was burned down by Viking raiders. In the 12th, rebuilt. In the 13th, it housed shops and homes. Yes, there were buildings on the bridge, even a chapel. It was a functioning street over the water, crowded and creaky. By the 17th century, it was so congested that people could barely move. Accidents were common. Fires broke out. Ice jams damaged the piers in winter. The bridge, though always rebuilt, was always falling down. The rhyme, then, may simply be a historical truth, a record in verse of a bridge that couldn't stay upright. But there's another theory, a darker one. Some believe the rhyme hints at an old superstition, that to keep a bridge standing, you had to bury something beneath it, a foundation sacrifice, a body, maybe a child. There are no records of this happening in London, but the legend exists. And like most legends, it lingers longer than fact. The verses continue. Build it up with wood and clay, then stone and mortar, then iron and steel. Each material fails. The bridge keeps falling. It's almost meditative, a loop of failure, a lullaby of impermanence. Children chant it while laughing, but the message is grim. Nothing lasts, not even something as solid as a bridge. And yet the rhyme persists. It appears in literature, in folk music, in horror films. It's been twisted into metaphors for collapsing empires, crumbling relationships, even aging bodies. The fall of London Bridge is everyone's fall. So why do we keep singing it? Maybe because there's comfort in repetition, in naming the fall, in knowing that others have fallen before and still rebuilt. And besides, not all bridges are meant to hold. Some are meant to remind. We have just one more tumble to take. Okay, everyone remembers this next one for sure. Humpty Dumpty, the fragile metaphor. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and no one, not the king's horses, not the king's men, could put him back together again. We all imagine him as an egg, round, white, slightly fussy, probably wearing spats. But the original rhyme never mentions eggshells or yolks. The egg was an invention, a later image gifted to Humpty by the Victorians and immortalized by Lewis Carroll. So what, or who, was Humpty Dumpty? One of the most enduring theories is that he was a cannon, a large wall-mounted siege weapon used during the English Civil War in the 1640s. The story goes that the cannon, stationed on a church tower in Colchester, was felled by enemy fire. It tumbled from the battlements and shattered, too heavy to lift, too damaged to restore. If true, it's a story not of clumsiness, but of downfall, military, political, and literal. Another theory suggests that Humpty was a person, a king perhaps, or a metaphor for one. Some point to Richard III, who was portrayed in Shakespeare as physically unsteady and politically unstable. Others see him as a symbol of anyone in power, high up, exposed, doomed to fall. And then there's the more abstract interpretation, Humpty Dumpty as a metaphor for fragility itself, for the condition of being whole, until you're not. His fall is abrupt, unexplained. We don't know what caused it. No wind, no push, no stumble. He simply falls. And that's what makes the rhyme so haunting. He breaks, and he cannot be fixed. There's something about that finality that resonates, especially in a world obsessed with recovery, with repair, with bouncing back. Humpty doesn't bounce, he shatters. Children chant the rhyme gleefully, almost mockingly. It's become a punchline, a cartoon staple, an icon of foolishness. But beneath the surface is something more solemn, a whispered truth about how some things don't mend. In literature and media, Humpty has become a tragicomic figure, sometimes wise, sometimes pompous, always precarious. He shows up in picture books, political cartoons, even therapy sessions, a symbol of collapse, of vulnerability, of what happens when the fall comes and help doesn't. And isn't it curious? The king sends horses and men, but neither are enough. The rhyme doesn't blame anyone. It simply notes the attempt, the failure, and the silence afterward. We've all known a Humpty. Some of us have been him. Sat too high, trusted the wall, took the fall, and learned that not everything gets glued back together. But maybe that's not where the rhyme ends. Maybe it's where a new one begins. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, but maybe that's not the only thing he had. Maybe he had a story, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough to keep singing, softly, sleepily, forever. Are you still batting an eye? Here goes another one. The lullaby lingers. And so, dear listener, we close the dusty cover on our book of rhymes for now. What began as lullabies turned into history's whispers, tales of power and play, collapse and resilience, hidden in verse and sewn into song. Maybe these rhymes were never meant for sleep, or maybe that's exactly what they were for. To hush the noise of the real world with something stranger, softer, and just a little unsettling. We pass them down not because they're perfect, but because they echo. Because in each quiet line, there's a mystery unsolved, a past remembered, and a rhythm we can't help but hum. So wherever you are, curled up in bed or drifting through twilight, let these sleepy stories keep you company. And when you next hear a nursery rhyme whispered, in the dark, listen closely. History is humming underneath. Here goes the second story. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of plague. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. We all fall down. So sings the circle of children, hand in hand, joyfully spinning before collapsing to the ground in a heap of giggles. Harmless, possibly, plague-ridden, maybe. For decades, a popular theory has suggested that this rhyme is about the Black Death, the plague that swept across Europe in the 14th century. The rosy might refer to the rash that appeared on infected skin. The posies were supposedly carried in pockets to mask the smell of decay. Ashes, ashes, echoed the funeral pyres, and we all fall down. Well, that one's self-explanatory. It sounds convincing, horrifyingly convincing, too convincing in fact. Many historians now argue that this interpretation is an invention of the 20th century. The earliest known versions of the rhyme don't appear until well after the height of the plague, and ashes wasn't part of the earliest texts. It may have been added later for dramatic flair, or by a particularly macabre teacher. Others suggest the rhyme is just a whimsical game devoid of deeper meaning. It's possible that we, as modern listeners, crave hidden darkness in childhood cheer more than those who first sang the words. Still, the idea stuck. And perhaps it's because it fits so well. There's something hauntingly comforting about imagining that the rhyme carried a hidden warning, some forgotten folk memory of pestilence smuggled into the schoolyard, a coded tale of survival, of grief passed down in the only way it could be, through rhyme and repetition. Consider the way children play it, dancing in a circle, singing the lines over and over, then the collapse. We all fall down. The fall is theatrical, giddy, but it carries with it a soft echo of mass tragedy, a performance of death played out in miniature, with laughter. The simplicity of the game adds to the mystery. No one questions why we say the words. No one explains them. They're just there, passed down like muscle memory, like the quiet instinct to sing in the dark. And it's not just the plague theory that makes this rhyme so compelling. It's the feeling it leaves behind. That soft chill beneath the play. That tickle of something ancient. Maybe it's not about the plague, but it feels like it is. And that's the power of folklore. Meaning isn't always about accuracy. Sometimes it's about resonance. And Ring Around the Rosie resonates, like a bell tolling softly from a distant time. In modern classrooms, the rhyme is still sung, still played. The history lesson is optional. The laughter is mandatory. And yet, the fall at the end, the sudden drop, is still part of the ritual. So maybe it isn't really about the plague, but maybe it's about loss, about repetition, about the way we turn fear into song. Because even if the ashes were added, later they stuck, and so did the fall. Let's talk about Mary, Mary, quite contrary, the Garden of Execution. Mary, Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. At first, it seems whimsical, a curious inquiry into the horticultural habits of someone named Mary. But, as with so many nursery rhymes, there's something in the cadence that feels a little sharp. A garden with bells and shells? Maids in a row? One of the most enduring theories suggests this verse isn't about gardening at all, but about executions. Specifically, the rhyme may refer to Mary Y of England, better known as Bloody Mary, The daughter of Henry VIII, Mary was a staunch Catholic in a country swinging Protestant, and she was willing to burn for it, or more precisely, to let others burn. Over the course of her reign, Mary ordered the execution of hundreds of Protestants, many by fire. These weren't just political purges. They were meant to restore the true religion. Her garden, then, was metaphorical, the rows of blooming maids, possibly rows of those condemned to die. But the imagery deepens. The silver bells and cockle shells aren't gardening tools, as one might hope. Some historians suggest they were euphemisms for torture devices. Silver bells were thumbscrews. Cockle shells might refer to instruments attached to sensitive areas as punishment. And the pretty maids, a chilling term for either execution victims or perhaps for the maiden, an early form of the guillotine used in Scotland. Now, to be fair, and to gently tuck your history nerd brain in, there's no universal agreement that this interpretation is the correct one. Some scholars believe the rhyme is later, some think it's nonsense. But like all good nursery lore, its meaning may not matter as much as the feelings it stirs. There's something unmistakably cold about this garden. Unlike the blooming fields of more cheerful rhymes, this one is rigid, repetitive, controlled. It evokes not a place of peace, but a garden of discipline and danger, of control through ritual. And so we might ask, why do we still recite it? Why teach it? Why sing it sweetly to children? Maybe it's because over time, the words soften. Maybe it's because we don't really listen. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because deep down, we're fascinated by the quiet tension between beauty and brutality. In literature and pop culture, this rhyme has endured. It appears in horror films, in suspense novels. It follows characters into dark woods and forgotten places. Its sing-song lilt turns ominous, familiarity turned eerie, because once you hear it in that tone, you never quite unhear it. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, contrary indeed. Asleep yet? Here goes Ba Ba. Black sheep, a taxing tune. Ba Ba black sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, 3 bags full. At first blush, it seems like the most harmless of rhymes. A friendly inquiry, a helpful sheep, wool distributed neatly and fairly. But beneath the fleece lies a story of economy, power, and possibly mild resentment. The earliest written version of this rhyme dates back to around 1731, though oral versions likely existed long before. One common interpretation connects it to the wool tax imposed in England under King Edward V in 1275. At the time, wool was England's most valuable export, and the tax was a significant burden on sheep farmers and wool producers. According to the traditional division described in the rhyme, 1 bag went to the master, the landowner or the king, 1 to the dame, the church or local nobility, and 1 to the little boy who lives down the lane, possibly the farmer, or more poetically, the everyman who ended up with the scraps. It's a simple economic allegory, a breakdown of distribution that shows how little was left for the common folk. The colour of the sheep, black, may also have significance. Black wool was rarer and harder to dye, often considered less commercially desirable, yet more valuable in certain circles. Some have interpreted the black sheep as a symbol of nonconformity, an outsider, the one who stands apart. Over time, the rhyme evolved. The little boy has been removed or replaced in some modern versions. And in the 20th century, debates began to emerge about whether the phrase black sheep carried racial undertones. While there's no historical evidence that the original rhyme had anything to do with race, the phrase's modern connotations have led to cautious reinterpretation. Still, the heart of the rhyme remains. A simple, almost transactional dialogue about resources. Who owns them? Who gives them? Who's left holding the bag? And while we like to imagine children merrily reciting the rhyme with hand motions and giggles, there's something stoic beneath the surface. The sheep answers plainly. The wool is accounted for. No one protests. But the subtext is there. The little boy gets just 1 bag. It's a sheepish nod to feudalism, to hierarchy, to the quiet acceptance of one's lot. The rhyme has also been reimagined in pop culture, cartoons, and parodies. In some versions, the sheep runs out of wool. In others, the tone becomes slightly rebellious. A refusal, a hint that the black sheep might not be so agreeable after all. And isn't that just like history? What begins as a tally of resources becomes a symbol of identity. A children's chant becomes a cultural mirror. So the next time you hear it, or sing it, pause to picture the little sheep, dutifully offering up his goods. Picture the hands waiting to receive, and the quiet little boy, down the lane, holding his single bag of wool. Soft, simple, subversive. Hope this boring history has put you to sleep. Sweet dreams, my friend. May tomorrow bring happiness and joy. So thank you for listening to Historically Drowsy. Good night.